This sound wasn't just the start of a game. It was the sound of revenge. It launched an empire, created legends, and defined a generation. But what if I told you the entire concept, the original prototype, and even the name PlayStation was invented by their greatest rival? This is the story of the worst business deal in history, and how a single moment of public humiliation created a monster that would redefine the art of video gaming forever. In 1988, Nintendo was the undisputed king of the video game world. They weren't just a company, they were a cultural phenomenon, with an 8-bit plumber who had a tighter grip on children's attention than their parents. But the king had a problem. Their golden goose, the game cartridge, was getting old. Cartridges were expensive to produce, held a tiny amount of data, and took weeks to manufacture. The future, everyone knew, was the compact disc. Over at Sony, a brilliant and slightly rebellious young engineer named Ken Kutaragi was obsessed with this future. He was a hardware wizard who saw the potential of CDs for creating vast cinematic gaming worlds. Working in secret against the wishes of the old-guard Sony executives who saw video games as vulgar toys, Kutaragi designed the revolutionary sound chip for Nintendo's next console, the Super Nintendo. His work was so brilliant that Nintendo couldn't ignore him. And so the two Japanese giants allied. A sacred partnership. Sony would create a CD-ROM add-on for the Super Nintendo. It was to be called the PlayStation. A prototype was made, the deal was done. Together, they would rule the next decade of entertainment. And then came the 1991 Consumer Electronics Show. It was supposed to be a victory lap. Ken Kutaragi sat in the audience, proud, waiting for the joint announcement that would change his life. Instead, Nintendo's chairman, Howard Lincoln, walked onto the stage and publicly announced that Nintendo was ditching Sony. They were breaking the partnership and had secretly signed a new deal with Sony's arch-rival, Philips. The betrayal was public, it was calculated, and it was brutal. In that one moment, sitting in that audience, humiliated, Ken Kutaragi didn't just see a failed business deal. He saw a declaration of war. Back at Sony headquarters, the project was dead. The official order from the top was to abandon the video game project entirely. But Kutaragi was relentless. He was a man possessed by an idea, and now by a quest for revenge. He went over everyone's heads, directly to Sony's most powerful leader, CEO Norio Oga. In a tense meeting, Kutaragi didn't just pitch a product, he pitched vengeance. He reminded Oga of the public humiliation Nintendo had inflicted upon them, and Oga, a man who understood the importance of honor, agreed. He gave Kutaragi a single mission: channel your fury. Build a machine that will make Nintendo regret the day they ever crossed us. With Oga's blessing, Ken Kutaragi assembled a small secret team of dreamers and rebels. This was the birth of the Sony PlayStation. Their strategy was genius in its simplicity: do everything Nintendo wouldn't. While Nintendo clung to expensive cartridges and family-friendly mascots, Kutaragi's team focused on the power of the CD. They created a system with groundbreaking 3D graphics that would appeal to an older, more sophisticated audience. They made the hardware cheap and easy for game developers to work with, a stark contrast to Nintendo's notoriously strict and controlling ecosystem. They weren't just building a console, they were building an entirely new culture. And that culture was one of rebellion. While Nintendo was laser-focused on the family living room, Sony targeted college dorm rooms and moody teenagers. They understood that the kids who grew up on Mario were now older. They didn't want simple fun. They wanted attitude. Their marketing was a masterclass in controlled chaos. While Nintendo commercials were bright, bubbly, and full of smiling kids, Sony's were bizarre, edgy, and almost unsettling. They hired legendary filmmaker David Lynch to create ads that felt more like surrealist horror films than commercials for a video game console. It was a clear message: this is not your little brother's toy.
PlayStation.
In 1995, the war began. At the E3 Games Conference, Sega announced its new console, the Saturn, would cost $399. Hours later, Sony took the stage. The executive walked to the podium and said a single number, $299, and then walked off.
299.
The crowd erupted. The first shot had been fired, and it was devastating. But a cheaper price means nothing without the games. And what came next wasn't just a launch, it was a revolution. The PlayStation didn't just play games, it created experiences. It was a console that smuggled adult storytelling into living rooms under the guise of entertainment. Nintendo gave us bright, colorful worlds. PlayStation gave us the gritty, rain-slicked corridors of a military base in Metal Gear Solid, pioneering cinematic stealth gameplay and a story that felt like a Hollywood blockbuster. Nintendo had us jumping on turtles. PlayStation had us raiding ancient tombs as Lara Croft, an icon who became a global superstar in her own right. The power of the CD meant that for the first time, games could have full-motion video, orchestral soundtracks, and voice acting that made characters feel real.
Police droppers.
This power gave us Final Fantasy VII, a game so massive, so emotionally complex, that it spanned 3 discs. Its story of love, loss, and saving the planet brought tears to the eyes of millions of gamers. It could have never ever existed on a Nintendo cartridge. From the insane, anarchic speed of Wipeout, to the birth of survival horror in the Spencer Mansion of Resident Evil, to the goofy, beloved charm of Crash Bandicoot, the PlayStation became the benchmark. It wasn't a toy anymore. It was a portal to 100 different worlds. The brand became synonymous with cool. The numbers tell the story. The Nintendo 64 sold a respectable 32 million units. The PlayStation sold over 102 million. The revolution continued. The PlayStation 2 became the best-selling console of all time, giving us legendary sagas like God of War and Grand Theft Auto 3, which created the modern open-world genre. The PlayStation 3, 4, and 5 have continued to push the boundaries of cinematic storytelling, with titles like The Last of Us and Uncharted being celebrated as some of the greatest stories ever told, period. All of this. Every iconic character, every unforgettable world, every late night spent with a controller in your hand. It all started with one man, a brilliant idea, and a moment of public humiliation. Nintendo didn't just lose a hardware partner. Through one of the most short-sighted, arrogant business decisions in history, they lost their crown and unleashed a force that would define entertainment for generations. The ghost of their deal didn't just haunt them, it became the king.